This is John Black, super chemist, talking about can a 2D universe exist? Let's see what they say, okay? They say you got a point that has 0 dimensions, it's just a point, but if you put a whole bunch of points in a row, you'll make a line, and that has length, that has 1 dimension. And if you take the length and you go into, you put your, going this way, you know, in this axis, now you got 2D. Because you have length and width. Now you can make 2-dimensional objects. This is a 1-dimensional object. This is a 0-dimensional object. Now if you stack, like if you get a whole bunch of these planes, 2D planes, and you stack them on top of them until they come out of the board, right, to you, now you'll have a 3D object. See, this is what is called an analogy, okay? An analogy is a lie, okay? See, if it was a truth, we would call it an example. We'd be like, this is an example. But no, we call it an analogy because it's a part lie. It's just so similar, you know, it teaches. You know, as long as you understand and you're not woke, you'll know that it's an analogy. Everyone's known it's an analogy for I don't know how long, then all of a sudden, they take out the lies. See, the thing is, if you have a 0-dimensional point, if it has 0 length, you can put them next to each other all day long, all you want. They're never going to have a line. They'll never have, they're not going to magically have dimension because you put a whole bunch of 0-dimensionally, you know, you can't add up a 0. You can have a bunch of zeros. You can have a million amount of zeros. But guess what? You add them all together, you still have 0. Just like length. If you have no length here, then you have no length here, you morons. It's an analogy to teach little children, okay? But apparently adults were too stupid to understand it was an analogy, okay? Same way with the 2D thing, okay? I want to tell you exactly what a 2D thing is. Can a 2D world exist? Yes, yes it can. In your mind, as a mathematical construct, yeah. In real life, no. No, it cannot. If this plane, if this 2D sheet doesn't have any height, right, to come out, you can stack them on top of each other all day long. I'll give you an example. If you have 100 people, they all make a shadow, right? They make a shadow. Here's 2 shadows, right? Now watch when I put the 2 shadows together. Guess what? They didn't get any more thickness. No thickness. They know. I could have 100 of these shadows, 2D shadows. They will never ever make a 3D object, no matter how many I pile on top of each other. You know why? Because they're imaginary. 2D universes are imaginary. By definition. They're a mathematical construct, for God's sakes, okay? Let's do some examples. What is a mathematical construct? Okay, big dimensions. Dimensions are a mathematical construct. 2D worlds, yes. You know why? What is a 2D world? It's a surface. It's a shadow. It's a painting, an image. Where does the word imaginary come from? Image. Imaginary image. Here, can I cover it up here? Can you see it now? They're the same freaking word. Imagine. Come on. Okay? A surface is an image. It's imaginary. It's a mathematical representation of the outer part of an object. Or like the top of a table, right? The surface of a table. But this is just an adjective, right? The surface just describes the top of the table, just like top does. But you can't carry a top around. You can't take the surface off of something, okay? Because surface just describes something. It doesn't, just like red, you can't take the red off of something. You can take the paint that is red and take it off, but you can never take the red off. Because red is a mathematical representation, right? It's not real. Okay, images aren't real. Okay, see this square. See what they're trying to tell you is that this black square is 2-dimensional. But if I shrunk you down small enough and put you here, this square would look like a mountain to you. It would look like a big giant wall. You wouldn't be able to get through it. You know why? Because this square is 3-dimensional. Just because we can't see it because we ain't small enough, you know. It's 3-dimensional. So they're lying saying this What is two-dimensional is the image of this. The image of this. The mathematical representation of this. Like 5 inches this way and 5 inches that way. The mathematical representation of this. It's like a surface. You can't... It's a description. Oh, this has 5 inches thick and this has length and 5 inches. Yeah, it's just description. Length, width, and all. It's just a description. You can't remove the length and the width and the height. Okay, you can't remove one of the dimensions because dimensions are just a description, right? They're not real. Okay, they're just mathematical descriptions, math adjectives, basically, just like colors, right? Just like if you have a surface of a table and it's red, can you remove the surface? Can you remove the red? No, you can't. You can remove, whatever is red, like paint. Colors are just mathematical representations of a corresponding wavelength of a photon. Your eyes don't see this orange, okay? The photons come and it's orange, so it keeps all the photons except for the orange ones. And the orange ones bounce off into your eyes. Your eyes do not see anything. Your eyes are just photon collectors. And as, if you're red, you don't have as much energy as blue, right? So if you're red and you're a photon, you come into your photon collector, which is your eyes, right? And it bangs into your eye, right? It's not going to have as much energy as a blue one. A blue comes down and smacks you harder, right? So you don't see anything. You just detect photons. And then depending on, how much energy, whether it's red or blue, then, that tells your photon detector, your eyes, how much electricity to send up to your brain. And then your brain says, oh, it has this much energy, let's pretend it's orange. And I'll put an image in your head of orange. But the object, it really doesn't look orange. You just think it looks orange because your brain told you that this wavelength is orange. See, it's a mathematical... Colors are a mathematical construct. They're not real. Okay? You can't pick up red or orange and take it anywhere. Just like you can't take a surface anywhere. You can't take a two-dimensional surface. You can't take the two best examples of a 2D world would be a shadow or an image. Okay? And a shadow is lack of light. Meaning it doesn't... But it exists, right? You can see the shadow of my hand, right? You can see the shadow I'm making on a board, right? It exists. But just as a mathematical representation, it doesn't really exist. It's just an image, right? And what's an image? Imaginary. Yeah, imaginary. See, and then what they did was, right, okay, this is what they did for string theory, right? They took this idea, right, that this 2D world that has no thickness and is just an image, and pretended that it has a thickness, and still called it a 2D image. You know what I mean? Basically, they're saying this marker on here is the 2D world. But that isn't true. That's still 3D. 2D would be the image of this, which would be in your brain, right? It wouldn't really exist. Just like the surface. The surface is just what your brain sees. Like, it's not really there. You can't pick up the surface. It's just an adjective, like red. You can't pick it up. So they used this, right, this lie, right, they twisted this analogy, okay, so that a 3-year-old would know that they're lying, but somehow they think that they can get 2D worlds, right, images, shadows, pile them on each other, and make 3D worlds. Okay, so then they used this. They said, look, we did the math and the physics, and it all turns out that you could have a 2D world. Yeah, you could have an imaginary 2D world. So what? It's still imaginary, though. You know? So then they said, then they twisted what Einstein said. They says, time is time is a dimension, a fourth dimension. And I used to say that, and I'm going to change it now. I'm going to put up videos saying that's bullshit. Okay, it is true. Time is a fourth dimension, but it's not a real dimension. Dimensions are mathematical constructs, you idiots. Okay, what he always said was there's no space or time. There's 3 dimensions of space-time, and he said you can think of it like you have a fourth dimension, time. Time is like a fourth dimension because mathematically it works out the same way. You know what I mean? But that's just a mathematical construct, okay? Time is a mathematical construct, not a thing, okay? It's not a dimension. It is a result of light always moving at the same speed. Time is not a real dimension, okay? It's just a result of that fact that speed moves at the same speed all the time. The dimensions are mathematical constructs, not real, okay? Dimensions are adjectives. Doesn't mean that there's no left and right and all that. There is left and right. I'm just saying they're not dimensions, okay? Dimensions are adjectives that mathematically describe a direction relative to something. That we just arbitrarily assign these coordinate systems with dimensions using math. But they're just arbitrarily assigned. They're not real. They're just mathematical constructs. They're imaginary. Okay? So can a 2D unit, and that's what they base the higher dimensions on. They're like, well, if you can have strength, that's what string theory is. Hey, you can have, we proved that they literally are spending money. They're looking for 2D universes right now. They're looking for imaginary dimensions. By definition. They're spending money, doing papers, having papers published, the money spent, government, oh yeah. Looking for imaginary 2D mathematical constructs. Then they say, oh, since time is which it isn't, is oh, look at this. It's a spatial dimension. It's not a spatial dimension. There's no time and space. There's only space. Time is just a result of moving through space. So then they said, if you could have this higher dimension of time, you could have even more dimensions, higher dimensions. And more and more and more. What's funny? There's like, 10 to the 80th atoms in the entire universe, they tell us, our observable universe. 10 to the 80, okay? And they say there's 10 to the 500 different permeations that you could use with higher dimensions. And they're going to go through, that's basically an infinitive number, okay? They're going to go through this infinity of numbers of mathematical constructs until they see one that lines up perfectly. And then whatever lines up, they're going to say that it's true. Of course they're going to find one. If you go through an infinitive number of mathematical constructs, yes, you're going to find one that lines up. That don't mean it has anything to do with anything. It's just, at that point, it's just statistical probability. When you're talking about infinities, or close to them, 10 to the 500th power, you might as well say infinities. When you're talking about infinities, yeah, of course you're going to find one. That don't mean it's true. It just means you're a nut job. You're doing science backwards. Instead of going the one way, you're going the other way. You're going to shove math down. You're going to make. You're just doing it backwards, man. So I'm going to do some videos about this because this is talking about string theory. They actually think that there's one-dimensional strings. Yeah, they're one-dimensional. They give this bull about manifolds. Yeah, I've read into their manifolds, and we're going to talk about that because it's a bunch of garbage. It's like reading something it reminds me of gender theory. You can't. There's an unlimited number of genders. Yeah, there's an unlimited number of dimensions that you could have. An unlimited. Oh yeah, unlimited. And they're gonna shove them down our throats just like gender theory. That's for sure.